Good morning. Please.
Hello. Nice to see you all. Well,
wow.
Mostly just big bright lights and some shadows.
Yes. My understanding is that this is the most attended session in the history of Future of TV Ads globally and Media.
The best event in the world.
In the world. Well, we know that, but
obvious.
The most ever here and in the overflow. And I know it's not because I missed the panel last year because of the Omnicom lockdown. So
I think it's an Omicron lockdown, an Omnicom lockdown.
Oh yes, exactly.
It's a little different.
I know, we have to be careful. I know, it's so hard in this business to confuse that. It's a good thing that's gone now, I think. All right, so normally the rule is here you don't actually get into the backgrounds of the speakers because you really want to get into the content, but I think probably the most important thing, I mean, obviously, Jeremy, that everybody not only is one of your customers here, they all know the ad business, they're all sort of like their favorite football team. They're actually not only really excited to learn about who's the new manager of the team, but they all are going to tell you exactly what game plan you should be running, what players you should have, and how you should go about it. I think the best thing we could possibly do here this morning is have them know a little bit about you. So tell us,
Sure.
I mean, I'll give a couple of the highlights, but I mean, you joined as the Chief Business Officer of Snap. You led global advertising in Amazon and a number of the different parts of it. Some time at Yahoo, Monster.
Yeah, all tech all the time. So this is really fun, actually. I'm learning a lot about television in real time. I've been in video, of course, through all of those machinations, but not in TV specifically. So I'm having a great time here, learning from a lot of you yesterday, and will continue to do so globally. Well, I'm not the most popular person in advertising. That's you. I heard our intro, so that is, that's fine. But born and raised in the Los Angeles, California area, which is where I live now. I'm a proud UCLA Bruin, which resonates more in America, but I'm still excited about it. And the trajectory of my career started in 1999 at Monster.com. And interestingly, it is because of a commercial that Monster.com ran. They had that When I Grow Up commercial. I don't know if you remember it, but it's kind of black and white. And it said, when I grow up, I want to be in middle management. I want to climb my way to the middle of the ladder kind of thing. And it was really inspirational. It was all these little children talking about what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I thought, that advertising is so powerful. I want to work there, not look for a job on that website. So I emailed them and asked if they had any jobs in LA, and they did. And I got hired when I was 21, and I've been in tech and media ever since.
Wow. So you're leading the global business at Snap, a massive and fast-growing and exciting company, and certainly based in Venice Beach, just up the beach from Hermosa. Why Netflix?
Because I really like Christmas movies and murdery things, so it worked out. And there's only one company on the planet that does both, I think, as well as Netflix does. It was not an easy decision, to be totally candid. I loved working at Snap. I am so excited for what their future trajectory holds. I was there 4 years. 2.5 of which were, from my house like everybody else. So it felt like it was faster than it was. But when this opportunity came, not dissimilar to what you're all experiencing, it was, oh my gosh, Netflix is getting into ads. I never thought that would happen. And putting that together with my past experience, I started at Amazon Ads, or what's now called Amazon Ads, in 2012. I thought, nobody gets the opportunity to do this twice. And at both Amazon and Netflix, I think one of the most important things is that the member experience or customer experience, more or less the same, is so essential to the company itself that advertising being put into it has to be done with a lot of tenderness and care. And I got to do it again. And I really like Netflix.
Awesome.
On Saturdays, I can say I'm doing homework, but really I'm just watching Stranger Things.
So tell us a little, you've only been here 2 months, so you have the best thing, which is any decision that's been made before you, you're like, I've only been here 2 months.
Yeah, it's great.
You've started building a team.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you're approaching it, what people should be expecting in the UK and Europe. We have, a lot of folks from.
Yeah, sure. So I think the most important thing to explain is the Microsoft role in the partnership with Netflix. This was announced 6 months ago that we were getting into the ads business, and now we are in the ads business, and that is true and factual that it happened in that 6 months. That would be impossible to achieve without a partner like a Microsoft, for instance, or like Microsoft themselves, from a tech perspective as well as a sales perspective. And I think it's really important to talk about that in context. They are our sales arm. So while we do have some sales leaders that I'll talk about in a moment, it's really Xandr and Microsoft that are doing a lot of the sales. So when we did a press conference in early October, we were already sold out at launch, which of course there were no subscribers that day and not until launch, so that wasn't hard. But then and that was all done by Microsoft. We did not work here. There were 0 employees in ad sales at Netflix, and that will continue. So in terms of building teams, what we're looking for right now, and we've hired, so there's 7 of us. There were 2 of us for 6 weeks. That was really tiring, by the way, and I did not get to catch up on my Netflix. So the people we're hiring are leaders and thought leaders in each of these spaces. So an example is Julie DeTralia, who joined us from the TV industry, just came from Amazon as our VP of measurement. Some of you may be familiar with Peter Naylor, who was ex-NBC, then Hulu, then Disney, and one of the earliest employees at Hulu, and he is running our ad sales team, and we'll be working in partnership with Microsoft and Xandr. We hired a woman from TikTok, so this is kind of an interesting, fun dynamic. So we have NBC, Disney, TikTok, I'm Snap, somebody else has joined from Snap who's going to be running our business operations as well. And then we have a woman who just joined us, Nicole Sabatini from Google, who was previously also NBC and Hulu. So I'm doing that on purpose. I want to make sure that we have people who've worked in digital and people who've worked in traditional television, because I think it's so important to understand the legacy of the incredible businesses that you have all build things to respect them, to participate in the ecosystem, but also have people who have been all digital all the time and bring those 2 thought groups together. And I should mention Adam Gerber, of course, who joined us from Group M, and many of you may know.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about him. So, because of your experience at Amazon, you have a sense of what it is to be bringing and building an advertising business, and a business that's not typically what I wake up every morning thinking about, like how are sales, what would the audience numbers. You have this in Netflix, and now I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say everybody understood for a long time that Reed Hastings was very clear that we will never, ever, ever be an advertising business. Now, he did at one point before also say we will never, ever, ever do our own original programming, but
right.
He did that. So we knew maybe it was
now
inevitable.
We learned to never, ever, ever say never, ever, ever.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. What people may be aware of is that just this past week at the Global conference and also at earnings as well, he not only has now said, I'm embracing advertising, or I think we might want to think about it, which is how he did the very first earnings call, but he's basically like a new convert. How does that feel? Oh,
it feels amazing. And I felt that internally too, although I'll tell a funny story that in between when I accepted the job and when I started was about a month between my notice period, et cetera. And they sent me some materials to review. I said, how can I get up to speed? How can I learn? And the very first thing that I read from Netflix said, we will not be in the advertising business. So I called back. I was like, this might be an error in judgment on my part. Is this a real job? So it was definitely gospel, but it feels amazing in the building. People are so excited about the opportunity to diversify revenue streams. And I think most importantly, particularly given the macroeconomic environment right now, the ability to have a lower price point for members is really, really critical. If we look at what's going to happen in this space over the next 6 months, or in the world, I should say, obviously fuel prices are going up, inflation, layoffs. I don't have to tell everybody this, it's all, not news. But then the entry of a lot of new players, SVOD or AVOD players into the space, people are going to start looking at their bills, and they should. And it's certainly a challenging time, and you want to do trade-offs between more fuel to get your kids to school or all of the streaming services. And so I think for Netflix and everybody else, having free options, less expensive options, giving members that choice is really important. And that feels really good in the building. Before it was such a binary choice. It was you either do or do not have Netflix. And now it's, okay, well, we're making it more affordable for people for a trade-off of only 4 minutes per hour of viewing with commercials. And I think that's a pretty good trade-off.
So how does it feel to have all the expectations. In other words, it's obviously, I mean, you've been incredibly successful in your career. Like, you've also now stepped into, you've stepped onto a stage that a lot of people are expecting and looking for Netflix to do for the future of video advertising what it did for the future of video.
Yeah, it feels surreal. It feels like I think everybody in this room and everybody globally has built the advertising business to be what it is today. And I think that it's pressure in a way to reinvent the experience for members in terms of saying, people don't hate ads, they just hate irrelevant ads. So how can we make them more relevant? How can we make it more seamless? How can we do fewer commercials? Again, kind of over the hour. I think it's very empowering to know that, for instance, in the UK, I'm stealing Barb's thunder here a little bit, but there are 37 minutes on average per daily streamer, and we have 20 of them. That feels like an incredible responsibility for the members to make sure the experience is really good and that we can continue to develop amazing content. I will tell you, though, that it is unbelievably surreal, and you can attest to this. Just backstage, I learned that this was the most attended ever, and I said to Dave, why? And so it's certainly not landed entirely in my brain, but I'm just really happy to be here and part of this business.
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of the things I did in advance of doing this interview is, I was here yesterday for the BTV event coming into this, and I was asking people, like, what kinds of things, what are you all hoping for Netflix and Jeremi and her team? And of course, that's when I know that they all, just like their football club, they all have exactly, here's the strategy, here's what she needs to do. She needs to do this. I hear they're doing this. I heard that they're going to price like this and do this. They shouldn't do that. Like, everyone has an opinion. But what I found was, and I wonder if you've been hearing this as well, they're very bipolar, and it depends if they're a digital person or a TV person. And there's this chasm in this notion of the future of video tends to be attacked from both sides. And what I'm hearing is a lot of people are thinking maybe Netflix could be the one that actually brings it together. Could it be the one that breaks the silo? Are you hearing some similar kinds of things like that? And do you think that you have an opportunity to chart a new path or a more centralizing path?
Yeah, I think so. Looking at it, to your earlier point about the way that Netflix has been able to innovate in the spaces that they have entered, from mailing DVDs to doing this big streaming business to getting into originals. What our business is today, which is largely 15s and 30s, although we are going to innovate and have different 10s and 20s and 30s and 40s. I know, big news. But I think the way that we launched the business is not representative of what we want the future of the business to be. It's just been so quick that we wanted to ensure that we had the most standard units and that we are getting into the standard measurement business. I think we have a really big opportunity to be that middle. But I think it's also really important to say that one of the things that I learned even before I started was how much rumor and swirl there is around what we're doing. So I want to say and share in no uncertain terms that we very much plan to participate in the ecosystem of television, to measure the way that television wants to be measured. Yep. It's just going to take time. Like I said, there were 2 of us. In this 8 weeks, we've done deals with Barb, with Nielsen, with Integral Ad Science, with Double Verify. I hope that's indicative of the way that we plan to be in the business and respect everything that you have all built. On the other hand, I also think we have this connected opportunity to make more meaningful experiences for the members. And now I'll kind of talk about 2 examples, one of which is ad breaks. So because we aren't 1 hour only or 30 minutes only, because it's 4 minutes of commercials per streaming hour, we are able to insert ads in the right places in shows that weren't written for ad breaks. So if you can imagine, I'm sure this is a fairly obvious statement, but right now we are putting ads in shows that weren't written for ad breaks, right? Because 2 years ago, when they were writing the shows, Netflix didn't have advertising. So we're using AI, for instance, to indicate the end of a scene using audio cues and audio fades, as well as the fade to black. So it's not that an ad is every 10 minutes, it's that an ad is where it should be. for the member experience, and I think that's really important. And another example that is not real, so don't try to buy this, but I think that we also have an opportunity, it will, these kinds of things will be possible, but when you look at the content and the context in which we can serve advertising, an example would be if there is a gift-giving moment in a show, for instance, we could have gift-giving packages, which are very different than we can only buy 18 to 34, or we can only buy on age, gender, geo. And those I think are very, very long term. Also, that might be a terrible idea that I just made up on stage. But I think it's also really cool when you start to think about what that context can be in the high quality content that we have.
So one of the things you said when you started there, which I think I'm sure to a number of people here, they may have known the news, but they still probably recognize that it's really unique, was as you were, and probably before actually you actually stood up the first ad, you'd already announced that you were going to join Barb.
Yep.
And that's not been typically the way the purely digital streaming offerings have been. It's been, we're going to take the money from TV, we're not going to basically fit into the TV ecosystem and be part of that. That was big. And obviously the Nielsen as well.
Yeah.
You get that. I know, yeah.
I think it's a great example of where it is really important for us that advertisers have an experience that they can compare apples to apples. And I think if we're, pairs, it'll be much harder for us to be in the ecosystem and much harder for advertisers to determine where their money should go from, is it TV money, is it video money, whatever it may be. So if we're measured on an apples to apples basis, which, again, we will be in time globally, then I think that we have a real opportunity to fit into the ecosystem while still innovating. But you're right, it was definitely backwards in terms of the way that we did it. A lot of that is just part of the speed, and also, again, kind of all the things I was hearing before I even started were, CPMs are too high, measurement, they're not going to do measurement, et cetera. And it was just really important that we were like, yes, we are.
Well, I think the point is, I would say it's actually not backwards. It actually was an incredibly powerful statement into the market to say, no, we're going to be part of that.
Great.
Because that isn't, we've, I think, a number of folks know that in some of the efforts where we have the different joint industry groups, the JIGs, which drive the TV measurement in some markets. Some of us were learning yesterday that in the Swedish market, for example, Google YouTube pulled out because they would not abide by willingness to be measured on a 15-second view and wanted, I believe, a 1-second view, which was like, most people would say that probably wasn't an ad. It probably wasn't viewed. So to me, that was like that's a big statement. I want to go back a little bit.
Can you teach me the jig first? Can you show
Oh,
everybody
no,
the jig? Okay.
That would be bad. Then we would lose the most attended session.
It would be the most talked about.
It might be. One of the things that Netflix has been known for since the company started was its innovation in culture. Mm-hmm. When I started Simulmedia, literally I took, the culture document that was, the 100-page or 120-page PowerPoint that Reed Hastings had shared out, and said, look, we want to do everything we can to be like this, and probably, I don't know if this probably didn't hit Europe as much just because of some of the different labor laws, but for example, the no vacation policy has become standardized in virtually every U.S. tech company, and it was a Reed Hastings innovation.
Yeah, and it's not no vacation.
Yes, exactly.
No
it's sort of like
policy,
it's a no vacation policy. In other words, we don't punch cards coming into our offices. Why should you punch a card on a vacation? You should take them when you want them.
Yeah.
And Reed famously actually takes a lot of vacations and takes them long, just to let everybody know.
I'll get there. It's not even tracked. So yes, you're right. All of tech has kind of moved to this. We don't have a vacation policy, take when you want to, but you still have to put it in the system. At Netflix, I'm taking, Christmas off like a normal person. We'll see how that goes, but taking Christmas off, and I thought, okay, well, where do I put that? And isn't Christmas automatically off? And it's not, but not in a bad way. If you celebrate, great. If you don't, you can work that day. It'll probably be nice and quiet. And there's nowhere to even put it. And I think that part is allowed people to move and innovate very quickly. His book is called No Rules Rules, and it feels like that.
So, it's interesting. I'm wondering how, and given Reed Hastings' comments last week, maybe that's an indicator. But do you feel now that you're enabled to just go innovate a whole new advertising culture, because it hasn't existed there?
It has not. I do feel very empowered. It's a very empowering culture in general, with a concept and notion of what's called an informed captain. So you don't have to necessarily be the boss of a department or the boss of a decision in order for that decision to get made. If you're the person who knows the most or is closest to the decision, you can make it. For the most part, I get to be the informed captain for advertising. And so things like, there's never been anybody on sales commission at Netflix before, and we don't have that right now, but we might need to, probably, if we want to participate in the ecosystem. Those kinds of things I feel very empowered to go and do, and people are just working really hard to figure it all out. I think the most important thing is that everybody on the advertising side of the business and everybody on the content side of the business are aligned, and we are, that the content creation aspect of Netflix is the magic, and we can't get in the way of that, and I don't want to.
So I want to sort of turn to the UK and the European markets, and having done business in different ways over here in the last 27 years or so, one of the things, at least points of view I have always come away from in sort of watching US companies when they're launching their ad businesses, or that a lot of times they drop their headquarters in London because that's where their Americans can speak a similar language. Not the same, but a similar language. And they sort of run it as an outpost. And the companies that tend to be the most successful, I'm just having this conversation with your colleague Damien, have been the ones that go local and recognize that, if you have Americans there, they're probably buried much deeper in the organization.
Yeah.
So how do you see, you've experienced working in Europe before in your Amazon days. So,
Snap, yeah, both.
And Snap as well, yes, obviously. What should the folks here know about how you're thinking about how you want to work with, with the folks in the UK and Europe?
I agree completely that localization is really important, and I also fully acknowledge that we didn't do a great job of that at the outset because it was so fast. None of it was purposeful, but we did hear yesterday, for instance, we met with a lot of advertising customers, and it was, hey, we don't work on an upfront schedule here. Why were you selling everything in upfronts? And it was, again, because of sort of tonnage, inbound demand, interest, and just the ability to run a singular process. However, the reason that I am here, I'm leaving right after this, going to Paris, is I want to sit and listen and learn to what the market nuances are. I'm learning those in real time. A lot of the team already knows them, which is nice, but we want to continue to listen. And that localized approach will be very important. So we'll have individual country leaders that are specifically from that country will be the goal, to make sure that they're understanding the cultural nuances. And Netflix does feel like an incredibly global company, and I think we've done a really good job on the content side of the business, so hopefully that gives people hope that we can do things locally. An example of that being our ability to make and license and build content like Squid Games out of Korea and make that a global sensation. Lupin out of France, global sensation. Casa de Papel, I can go on, and I think that's very different than we export everything from America. We don't. We import things to different countries, and different things resonate in different parts of the world. The care with which we take things like translation is really, really remarkable. Things I'm learning, as I've only been there 8 weeks, is they cast the voiceover actors and actresses to sound essentially like the actor or actress that was playing the person in the first place, versus just somebody in a dark room doing a read-along, because then you can feel it. And for those of you who've watched something like Casa de Papel, it's very clearly done. Sometimes you're like, is this the voiceover? Is this dubbing, or is this original? And so those are kinds of examples that I think that we've already shown we want to participate in a global ecosystem, but in a very local way, and you should expect advertising to be the same. Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things that's obviously a special opportunity for you and for Netflix is that, you're by far the largest global long-form video company in the world. And we were talking a little bit backstage about acronyms because, unfortunately, and too many American companies particularly like acronyms, and I don't know exactly where they came from.
We're very lazy. We just like the little short things. I don't know.
But one of the things that I continue to hear from speakers every time I'm at a conference, or they try to say, well, to the consumer, it's just video.
Yes.
And, how can you imagine, and certainly Netflix has been part of that. I was there at the event where the then CEO of Time Warner famously compared Netflix to the Albanian army.
Oh, good.
And not that the Albanian army isn't ferocious, because I think everyone knows they were the ones that guarded Hadrian's Wall, a long time ago.
I don't think everybody knows that. But
I think a few more people here know that than if I was saying it in New York.
We know that. Yeah, that's great.
But it was pretty dismissive, and his point of view was that it was a PC-based business, and that's how Starz saw it when they licensed all their great content to it, and obviously then Netflix launched from there on a streaming basis. Most advertising has never really been able to really be done truly globally. It's not an anti-local thing, but it hasn't. Do you see this as an opportunity that you may be able to do some things, not just really conform and extend what's being done locally, but do some things for brands globally that has never been done?
Yeah, I think so. Especially with this content being able to cross borders and these kinds of things, when you start to think about how brands can be associated with shows that will be global sensations. Like The Crown is a very good example of something like that. It's obviously a very local show. On the other hand, it is also a massive global hit. What is the opportunity for a global advertiser like a L'Oreal, for instance, to get involved in, actually a better example would probably be our originals, but to get involved in those kinds of shows, not from necessarily a product placement basis, but if you think about the relevance associated with a show, I'll use Bridgerton again instead as an example. Is there an opportunity for that ad to be contextual and relevant and exportable for a global brand? And what I mean by that is not having an experience where, okay, this is a period piece, and then 2 minutes later there's an electric truck driving down the streets of New York. That's a very herky-jerky experience for the member, probably for the creator, et cetera. And I think that there's an opportunity, especially as we build out our original slate, to say, what actually makes sense in that moment? How do we insert it? How do we participate in it? And I think when I think about kind of the dream, I think there are a couple of places, Times Square, Piccadilly, the Super Bowl, certainly the World Cup, where advertising is as much of a draw as anything else. So, if you take the ads out of Times Square, you just have Elmo. And I think that that if that's the aspiration for all of us, by the way, where that people want to come to what we're doing because the advertising is so good, so topical, so relevant, so compelling, is treated the same way content is, lucky us, lucky Netflix, lucky advertisers, lucky subscribers, members, whatever you may want to call them. I think that there's an opportunity to do that.
So you talked a little bit earlier about the fact that viewers don't necessarily hate ads, but they probably hate irrelevant, redundant ads. Do you feel that you're going to have the opportunity to say no? Will your teams have the opportunity to say no? We don't want that ad, we don't want that creative, we're not going to take that pod kind of break that way?
I think everybody has that opportunity. I hope we don't do it very often. Certainly we'll want to make sure that we take ads that are relevant and
I meant more along the lines of that, some people may feel like, if we don't make this quarter number, we have to take.
Got it.
Yeah, we're going to have to take something we really would prefer not to take.
I think that is the beauty of building an ads business within the confines of an already profitable and very large streamer, is I don't think we will have to do that. At least not for a real, no, I guess is the answer. I don't think we will feel compelled to do that protecting the member experience is the most important thing. So it won't be like, oh, maybe 4.5 minutes this time, or maybe 6 minutes this time just to make the quarter. I've felt none of that pressure. It's all about the experience.
So we're at the end of this session, but what's the one last thing that you want to leave this audience with as your...
I just want to say thank you for welcoming us, Netflix, me and Dave, into the industry. I know I have a lot to learn. Netflix knows that we have a lot to learn. And thank you for your patience and your time and your information and your partnership. You said everybody in here is a customer, so thank you for that too. And for helping to build the future with us. I'm really, really eager to do it alongside all of you.
Great. Thank you, Jeremi.